Good afternoon. I am Howard Reed, Chair of the College Senate. It is a distinct pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce Buffalo State College's president, Dr. Aaron Podolewski. In less than 2 years, he has gone from being our new head administrator to being accepted as an integral part of this college's community. He has embraced this campus's vision and values, yet has brought an original, vibrant perspective. His openness and upbeat attitude are universally appreciated. Obviously, this is a challenging time for the state of New York and for this college. It seems it always is. As Dr. Podolewski has made clear, this is also a time of great opportunity. We are all grateful for his thoughtful, consistent, and supportive style of leadership. Will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Podolewski, who will deliver his second State of the College address.
Thank you so much, Howard. It's always a pleasure to have you introduce me. You say such nice things. I want to welcome a few special guests here today. Eunice Lewin, who's a member of our SUNY Board of Trustees, is here with us today. Howard Zemsky, our new leader to our College Council, is here today. Howard, thank you very much. Melissa Brinson, member of the College Council, is here today. Charles Naughton from the Council is here today. Our newest College Council member, Gary Brost, is joining us. Thank you, Gary. They are here checking on me, as you know. And Josh Lipka, our student representative to the College Council, is joining us. Josh? He was here a minute ago. Thank you so much. "48 years ago, really, 48 years ago, I walked onto a college campus, San Jose State College, to embark on this future endeavor called going to college. Tuition was free, and fees were under $30. And I had, in that 4 years, a transformative experience, an experience that changed my life. Now, one of those things that I just described is still true. And we'll talk about both of them, though. Each year, thousands of students come to Buffalo State looking for that experience. The experience like I had and like all of us had on a college campus. About 1,400 or 1,500 new students as freshmen start out here. If you include graduate students, we graduate about 2,600 every year. That's because they multiply. You all know better. I said that to somebody the other night over dinner. I said, we bring in 1,428 graduate, 2,600 graduate, and he looked at me, and I said, well, students transfer and all of that, but he wasn't aware of that. Well, when these students come, like when I came, they're looking for the experiences that are given to us by our faculty and staff. And our faculty at Buffalo State is like none other. They're dedicated to students, they care about students, they nurture students, they engage them in all sorts of activities, from undergraduate research. Now, most of the faculty aren't out on the football field with them, but they engage them in lots of things. They even take them to Rwanda for the kind of experience that changes a person's life. We opened our new Community Academic Center, through which students will be engaged in the community. These by the way, are not our students. These are students from a local public school. But Gary Wellborn and the mayor and Superintendent Dixon and Laura Rao and Trustee Lewin and some students and Vice President Payne all came down to help us open this center and create a difference right on Grant Street in a storefront opportunity that brings the university into the community. And it was all done with a very generous gift by one of our alums, who I think, but I can't remember, may have been a third grade teacher of mine in California. Because it turns out when we went to visit she taught at Bub Elementary, and I said, I think I went to Bub. But it's part of my distorted youth. I can't remember much before about the fourth grade. I also don't remember Woodstock, but that's a different story. But the day eventually comes when they graduate. It's a joyous occasion. When I was an assistant professor, I didn't go to graduation. I just was in my office writing books and writing articles and preparing for classes that would come in the summer. But I tell you, if you don't go, you should go to graduation. It's an amazing experience when you see the joy on those students' faces, which is not so much by being gone from here, which they'll tell you they're going to miss, but it's their anticipation of starting a new life. And the joy on their parents' faces, which is from not getting the next U-bill. But it's a great experience, and I love shaking their hands as they come across the stage. We are going to send them out into the new world, a new world for them. And we know that there are many things that they have accomplished, that they've learned through our efforts and their own experiences that will change their life. There are characteristics we all know of graduates. We know that they share different habits of mind than when they came to campus 4, 5, 6 years earlier. We know that their abilities to think critically, to act reflectively, to appreciate the arts, to appreciate diversity, are all enhanced. And I could go on with what I consider the qualities of an educated student. And we all know them because that's what we do. It also turns out, by the way, that they vote more frequently, that they have longer lasting marriages than those who have not gone to college, that they live healthier lives, that they engage in community economic success. In fact, the data are clear. A community that has more college graduates has higher income levels for high school graduates, even those who did not graduate from high school. That educated community raises the economic base. And of course, as all those individuals know before they come, although it's not necessarily a driver of them coming to college, that they will have higher personal income. Now, we all say it's not about the money, and I believe that. But for many of our students, this is the route to a middle-class lifestyle, and we can't ignore that. The Chronicle of Higher Education came out with some data, and there's a web page you can go to, and it ranks different schools by things like graduation rates. One of the columns is Pell Grant eligible. And if you go to that column and click on the top, which rank orders them, we are third in the state of New York among all public institutions, public four-year institutions, in Pell Grant eligibility of our students, 57%. The only schools that are higher are Medgar Evers and another of the city universities of New York. We take in students for which this education is of critical importance for their futures and their families' futures and their children's futures. And that's a solemn responsibility. And we graduate, if you compare graduation rates with other schools that are even close to us in Pell recipients, We are outstanding because we all know that income is a strong correlate of graduation, whether it's high school graduation or college graduation. So while we may not be Harvard, although I probably think we really are as good, and I don't say that facetiously, I guarantee you can get as good an education at Buffalo State College as you can get at a classroom in Harvard. You may not make the friends who are going to become billionaires, but you can get a great education at our institution. But we should be proud of our graduation rates because we work hard at it. But I said it's important for these students, and it's critical. I hope you can read that from here. On your left is unemployment rates. 2010, they're actually better now for college graduates at about 4%. Bachelor's degree graduates are unemployed at a rate of about 4%, while the nation is at about 8%. That's important. Unemployment, while we all talk about the unemployment rate, is not evenly distributed. It's very heavily leaning towards high unemployment rate for those who don't graduate from high school, less so for those who graduate from high school, and on up. They show us at 5.4. I think now it's more like 4 point something or other. But that's a critical importance for individuals' future. On the other side is income levels, 2010 data. And you can see to be over the median, on average, to be over the median income in this country, you need a college degree. Now again, if anybody knows me as a scholar and an academic, etc., it's not all about the money. But we have to understand that for our students, this is not insignificant. Now people have been talking about the crisis in higher education for years. The crisis is not the lack of our success. In 1900, about 4% got high school graduates. In 1950, about 20% got high school college graduation. About 20% of high school graduates went on to college. In 2009, about 70% of high school graduates went on to college. 2010, it dropped down to about 68%, but 2009 was the historical high for college graduation, high school graduates. Our challenge in Buffalo is half of our students don't graduate from high school. 50% of Buffalo's high school students don't graduate from high school. And we will have to help rectify that. It's important for us because those students are going to come onto our institution. Then they're going to go make more money. And then they're going to make Buffalo a better place to live. What used to be a privilege for the few is now really something that's expected for everybody. The challenge for us, as you might know, is what's long been called the iron triangle in higher education. It's quality, access, and cost. It's very, very difficult to improve quality, maintain access, and reduce cost. It's a lot easier if somebody dumps a whole lot more money in and says, improve your quality, lower your class size, have higher proportions of this, that, and the other thing. But this is the iron triangle, and it's really a tough challenge. It takes creativity and hard work. Today I want to focus a little bit on cost. I didn't mean to punch that yet. I'll get used to it. Cost, right there. In fact, I'm going to be really interested in what we mean by the word cost. You know, people keep talking about the cost of going to college is going up. And the cost of a college education is going up. I think we need to understand, so we can all be ambassadors for higher education, we need to be able to understand and explain it. We need to be able to know something about the national trends. We need to be able to know something about the state trends and something about the trends in Buffalo State. So if you'll bear with me, I won't walk through some of that. I hope it's interesting to you. This is an interesting chart, which I think you should be able to read. It's the state fiscal support for operating expenses for higher education per $1,000 of personal income in the United States. Now, since it's per $1,000 of personal income, it's not measuring how many dollars actually, but the folks who create this chart say it reflects commitment from the state or from the United States and its citizens for public higher education. And as you can see, starting in 1961, it certainly went up pretty quickly. And I tend to call that the Sputnik effect. 1957, of course, Sputnik landed. There's probably also some effect in here for the baby boom generation, but probably not really, and we didn't see a huge rise when the baby boom echo hit college. But nationally, the spending per $1,000 of personal income capped at about around 1980. And then it began to decline. And if you were to follow this trend line out, you would see that it zeroes out in 2059 nationally. That's not good news. This is not good news if it really does represent commitment. This is the state of New York trend line over the last 50 years. Again, you see the quick rise, the late 70s, early 80s, and then the decline. A little bit encouraging, although the state of New York looks like it's going to bottom out in 2038. This is a little bit encouraging in that it doesn't, since you start this, this number results from beginning a trend line up here. If you began the trend line over here, it would look a lot better. And of course, we now have a maintenance effort clause in legislation. But this, again, gives you some of the background in terms of 50 years of commitment towards public education. It's not a very happy curve. If you looked at the states across the country in what they support per $1,000 of personal income, we have Wyoming. Of course, there's only 3 people in Wyoming. So, and in North Dakota. Now, North Dakota, by the way, has been raising its revenue for higher education for years, and it's oil. It's oil in North Dakota. North Carolina, a couple of years ago, New Mexico was the highest at $14. But we're ranking here about 34th out of 50 in our dollars, public dollars for operating costs for higher education, public higher education across the country. Now, if you wanted to see it on a map, this is what I used to show this map when I would testify in the legislature in Missouri, and I would say, can anybody find Missouri? And that all drew their eye to that one, which usually made my point. But luckily, I don't have to testify in the legislature here in New York. We have a chancellor who does that. But one thing is interesting, even though we're in this yellow, which is second from the bottom, we're kind of low amongst that category, but we're surrounded by even lower states on the per $1,000 of personal income. Remember, this is not gross dollars. We'll get to that, but this is, again, effort and commitment. It's kind of odd. It looks like in some cases, some of these states are really trying to catch up. In some of these states, like Colorado, there's really an ideological fight going on about the role of public funding of private enterprise. Let's move from that sort of higher order to what Buffalo State's state appropriation has looked like over the last 20 years. A couple of things to be noticed about this is, first I want to make sure it's clear that this first one is 5 years, this one is 5 years, the rest of these are annual, just to fit it on the chart without making you scrunch up too much. But the first thing to know that in actual dollars, we got, from the state of New York, we got $26.6 million in 1991, and we get $23.9 million today. That's less money in actual dollars. The other thing I think would be interesting to note is that it goes up and down. sort of like a seesaw. The problem here, starting in about 06, 07, is that what my colleagues and I talk about when we get together as presidents is this the new normal? Is this going to stay like this? Or is it going to do this? I mean, you lost a bunch of money in 1 year, and then in the next couple of years, it came back. But is this going to stay like this? Now, this is not a function of enrollment, by the way. This is, our enrollment's going up over this years we've increased by at least 500 students in full-time enrollments. So it's not an enrollment issue. Of particular interest is if you took here's our friend, $26 million over here. If you adjusted this $26 million over the 20 years by the Consumer Price Index, the red line, you would find that we're now at about $14 million. The buying power of $26 million in 91 is now $14 million. We get 23, but the buying power is $14 million. So you can see what the buying power is from our state revenue. And if you use the Higher Education Price Index, does that say 12? Yes, 12. I thought it said 22, and I thought that's a typo. 12, the Higher Education Price Index, it's even lower. But for those of you who don't know, the Higher Education Price Index is a market basket of goods that we would use in higher education, as opposed to the market basket of goods consumers would buy. We don't buy a heck of a lot of broccoli, but consumers buy food, they pay rent. We buy computers, and we pay utilities, and we pay salaries. So the Higher Education Price Index is a market basket of what we buy. Using that standard, we're getting the $12 million buying power for what we used to have 20 years ago at $26 million buying power. Now take those same numbers and turn them around and do them a little differently. If we had $26.6 million back then, and you forget about that whole bottom line, which is that same graph, it's just squished a little bit because we put it on a little bit different scale. If you took our $26.6 million and increased it by the CPI, you would have $50 million. This is using the Common Fund inflation index. $50 million rather than our 23.9. Now, I'm going someplace with this. I don't want to make you feel bad. I'm not doing this to make you feel bad, but I am going someplace. Here is really one of the more interesting charts. The bottom is our old friend, state appropriation. Always happens to me. The bottom is our old friend, the state appropriation. The red line is our tuition revenue. Since enrollment hasn't changed that much in 10 years, a little bit, it's really our general tuition revenue. There's a few things that are interesting about this. You notice whenever the state increases its revenue, here or here, the tuition doesn't increase very much. When it goes down, the tuition goes up. It's an interesting phenomenon. Nobody's raising tuition just because. We're not trying to get fat on tuition. And here is what people are talking about in the last few years, the cost of college. Now, by the way, people forget that for Buffalo State, we still only charge $5,270 for tuition. And I'm fond of saying you can get 4 years of college for the price of a Chevy. Which would you rather pay? Where do you want to do it? How do you want to invest in your son or daughter's future? You want to buy them a car and let it depreciate, or you want to help them get a college education and have their lives appreciate? So it's important when we show this chart because everybody confuses our tuition with the privates. If you tell somebody it costs $5,200, you know what they'll say? I pay more than that for my child's public high school or for daycare. So if you ask people in surveys, what the average tuition is at a public college, they'll tell you $20,000 when it's a quarter of that. So the interesting thing is that long rise and that opposing long decline. Together, they produce a total appropriations plus tuition plus fees that has gone up fairly modestly. In the last few years, it's gone up slightly. What you don't see on here is in expenditures. There are a lot of mandatory cost increases like utilities and salaries and other things that have grown faster than this growth. But it's very important to know that has grown slightly. This part, if my pointer will work, and it won't, is the key picture. By the way, I should tell you that $285 million is our tuition, fees, and appropriations, but it doesn't include benefits, which are held by the state. It doesn't include grant funding. It doesn't include the residence halls. The total is really a couple of $100 million. And sometimes we get under-compared in terms of size with some of our other colleagues in Buffalo because they're sharing their whole package, and we're only giving out this other part when we talk about what we've done. The question here, though, is the price that people pay, that tuition, is going up rapidly. But the cost of educating a student is not. If you really, let me go back. The cost of educating a student, the blue line, is not going up so fast. The cost of the tuition parents, students are paying is the red line. It is. And so this is a real interesting dilemma on what people call the cost. Most people say the cost of college, they mean the tuition. But think of that as the price, not the cost. The price they pay is going up. The cost, what we spend, the cost of producing, if you will, take that analogy, that language in some sense is unusual. The cost of producing a graduate, the cost of getting somebody to graduation is not increasing so quickly. This is an interesting chart because over 10 years, what I did, and I've done this before, is the blue line is that what we spend divided by the number of student credit hours we teach. And you can see that it has gone up over 10 years. But the red line is what it would have gone up if it were increased only by the consumer price index, and the green line is what it would have done if it increased by HEPI. And you know what this means? It means that the increase in our spending per student beats inflation. Nobody will believe that when you tell it to them because they only think of the cost as the tuition. They haven't seen the tuition going up and the appropriation going down. Sum them up, and you end up in this condition. Now, by the way, this doesn't necessarily mean it's good. We all know the price of that going down. We have fewer tenure track faculty per student, and maybe class sizes are getting big. But nobody can say, if you want to use the word efficiency, that we have not become more efficient. Okay, our spending per student beats inflation. So there's a key message in this part of what I'm going to talk about today, and that is what we spend to educate a student beats inflation. What the parents pay is going to primarily going up, and it's primarily due to past historic reductions in the state appropriation, reductions in commitment, if you will. Back to our cost quality triangle, access, quality, cost. We have done everything we can do no, that's not true. We have done a lot. We can always do more to reduce or maintain the cost. Some of those things that we might do would have a significant impact on quality or on access. And that's the balancing act that we play. We can always reduce cost if we do not care about quality and access. We could fill this room with general education courses, as some institutions do. But I remember my son who called me one day and said, "Dad, I want to drop out of this world religions course." I said, "Why, Isaac?" He said, "Well, I want to talk to the teacher and engage him in conversations." I said, "Well, go ahead." He said, "Dad, there are 700 students in my class." 700 students. Mega research university in the Midwest, and that's how they did it. Well, we don't do that at Buffalo State. And I don't think we're going to do that at Buffalo State. No, let me not change that. We are not going to do that at Buffalo State. I don't want somebody running out and the president said he doesn't think we're not going to do that. I want to make sure I'm clear. We are not going to do that at Buffalo State. And we don't do that because our faculty love our students. And our students, by and large, love our faculty. Every alum I meet tells me a story about some faculty or some staff member who changed their life. Trust me, even if you don't know it's happening now, they'll walk out and they'll say, so-and-so, really, I one, well, don't even go there. But, we care, and they care, and that's why we're all dedicated to these young men and women that come to our campus. So what do we know about the budget so far? Well, we know, first of all, Chancellor Zimpher has been terrific in helping us with the governor and the legislature get two things that will be essential. That's the rational tuition plan, which is good for students in a way. It is good for students. They will know what tuition will change. It's 5% a year for 5 years. And what's my colleagues, when I talk to them, drool about, which the maintenance of effort. Now, as far as you can take it to the bank, the legislature has said, we will not cut your budget. I tell that to my colleagues in other states. They just, in fact, we had accreditors in the other day, and they said, what are you going to do about your budget? And I said, well, we've got these things. And they just said, wow, that's great. So we don't know, how lucky we are in that sense. Now, for Buffalo State, there's still a gap between our expenditures and our revenues. It comes from years of having modest growth. When you're in a situation where it goes down and then a year or two later it goes up, you don't necessarily adjust. You figure you'll ride it out. But now when it's gone down for so many years in a row, we no longer can do that. There's a gap between our revenues and expenditures. We took a hard whack at it last year. You all know we went through that. But once we had this rational tuition plan and the maintenance of effort, we now can be more planful. There is no new appropriation for 2012-13 from the legislature, but we are not going to be cut. There is a new tuition increase. The students know that. We all know that. It's 5%. But you need to understand, just, again, not a complaint, but you need to understand when you say, where'd all the money go? 25% of it is being held back for what's called the TAP gap. The tuition assistance program in New York goes up to $5,000 max. State University's tuitions now are $270 over that. And some legislatures with great intentions, and I don't disagree, said that $270 per TAP student has to be made up by the institutions. And we all agreed because the alternative is no tuition increase or what have you. So that's about 25%, and it's being handled across the board. We're not going to be penalized because we have a lot of more low-income students in the other campuses, and that's a good thing. But that really knocks while the students are paying 5%, we're really getting 3.75% of that tuition. And remember, it's a percent of the tuition, which is only a part of our budget. So you have to think what we're really getting is about 2.7% of our budget. So the 5% tuition we're paying, students are paying, comes in at about 2.75 of our budget. So if anybody says, where's that 5% go? The real answer is, where's that 2.7% go? There's a few things we don't know. First of all, SUNY, which one is first? SUNY is developing a new budget model, and we don't know where it's going to come out. They may decide how to reallocate the money they get from the state to the campuses. The second thing is SUNY is now talking about performance funding. We have no idea what that's going to mean. We don't know. I don't know what they're going to be counting or not counting, and that's still in flux, the conversations. There's a resource allocation committee. I spent a year on it last year. I'm not on it this year. I just volunteered myself off when I started chemotherapy. I said, I can't be doing that, and the other things I need to get done on campus, so I'm not on that, but they're doing good work. What will we do? Well, first, we have the advantage, because of the rational tuition plan, the maintenance of effort clause, and some modest reserves, and modest over the minimum that we have to keep. SUNY requires us to keep a minimum, so if somebody looks at your reserves, it's not all money we can spend unless you really have a catastrophe. So the amount that's over the minimum will allow us to play this out over a couple of years instead of being on the crisis day to day. Now, we're lucky. Some states do not allow their universities to carry forward leftover dollars. Many of these leftover dollars, by the way, are earned through entrepreneurial activities, through leases, rentals, other things. When we had Campus West here, we were paid by the school district for the use of that building. So many of those reserves were carried out, earned that way. We want to develop an all-funds budget approach, which means we want to assure that all these different places we take in money from get used in a strategic strategy to meet our core mission. Okay? We want this, by the way, to be transparent. I hope we will have a budget book that we can put in the library. In other places, I put it online, but only open to university personnel. We want to continue to seek ways to reduce our expenditures, increase our revenues. We changed how we do the J term. We netted about $600,000 difference. We changed how we offered courses in summer school, about $400,000. We're working with UB to develop shared services, and Don Irwin's chairing that effort, and we have a large group from our planning committee, budget committee that's working with Don on campus, and we have time. SUNY says that will take the time, and if you go back to number one, do nothing stupid. We'll have a lot of consultation. We won't be doing anything that destroys our institution. We also, I think this is very exciting, are looking towards a fundraising campaign. It can generate what we would think of as the margin of excellence for the institution. I'm particularly concerned about those students who have a tough time, who are low income or even, and the students who are highly meritorious, to want to be able to recruit them to our classes. So I want to launch at some point a fundraising campaign, primarily in the beginning focused on scholarships, and then in a second phase leading to other kinds of revenues, tentatively titled Transforming Lives, because that's what we do. And this is very exciting, by the way, and one of the first things that's really important for us is that we need to show, when I and others go out and ask donors for money, we need to show that we're on board. And right now we have a faculty and staff campaign going on, and I would ask that everybody step up to the plate to at least some degree, a quarter, 50 cents, whatever, you know, something. We'd like to have everybody on board. So that's my plug for that. But it's serious. It's hard to ask somebody for a lot of money and they say, well, are your faculty and staff on board? And you really want to say, yeah, they are. And you know, by the way, we are just outstanding in SUNY compared to other institutions in our annual faculty and staff campaigns. You are so generous. And so please understand that I'm just asking you to reach a little deeper. Didn't know you were going to get a fundraising pitch, did you? Next year, nobody will come to this. Anyway, well, that's the story on where we are, the budgets, and what we're going to do and how we're going to move through, and everything's fine at this point, but we've got to keep in mind that we're running on reserves. The reserves don't carry us but more than a couple of years. We got to take these actions. We got to take the new revenues. What happened, just to be clear on that, is we have faculty or staff who are being paid, they don't know it, but just the budget, the revenue includes a lot of reserves. So they're really being paid on reserves. And when those go away, we don't have the money to fund them. So these new dollars will go into pick up those salaries, those faculty and staff salaries, and so we end up with an annually balanced budget. Now, at the same time, I want to, do I have time? Well, I'll do this quickly. We still have a few minutes? I'll do this quickly. We've been in great shape. You're probably wondering about buildings and construction. This is wonderful. New York State has been wonderful about maintaining infrastructure compared to others. I want to run through a little bit of what's happening there fairly quickly. We have the new phase 1 of the science and math buildings, $52 million project, phase 1. It'll be LEEDs Gold, which is second highest rating. New York State only asks us to be LEED Silver. It will look about like this. The inside at present, on your left, is what it looks like a couple of weeks ago. On your right is what it will look like. It is going to be one gorgeous building. The outside looks like this now. You can see up on the top there, that's the utilities infrastructure, if I'm correct. Steve? I'm looking at Steve because it's going to look like that. The part I just showed you is the part that's in the back half. This is going to be phase 2. And then we're also doing, at the present time, the technology building. You can see that going up. That's a $38 million project. It should be completed in summer 13. Did I mention that the phase 1 of the science, well, I won't go back. Phase 1 of the science building will be done this fall. So we're looking at the technology building here. This includes a green vegetated roof over an area I'll show you later, and an array of photovoltaic cells on the roof to help us with utilities. The green roof will be along here. I don't know who's going to mow that lawn. Steve tells me I'm going to do it, but we have classrooms will be high tech. You'll be able to control everything, including the window shades and lights from the podium. We have Rockwell Hall third floor renovation going on. There'll be a new, should be open I think sometime this summer. This is going to include a new recital hall, which is going to be a wonderful addition for our programs. We have also several high-tech classrooms going on up there, and this is the renovation of the art conservation space. Third floor in the Union is going to be fixed up. That'll be ending spring 2013. Looks like a gorgeous renovation to me, and the downstairs is going to be fixed up. You can see that large cement staircase is gone. The access upstairs does not presently meet code for accessibility. This does, and it's going to give it a whole new open look compared to what it has now. We have a plan for the 4 towers, the Skajackwada towers, to be rehabilitated, one every year, 2 years, and the first one should start spring 12 or summer 12 and will be done in a year to 2 years, and the other 3 thereafter. Each one we take offline, about 200 students don't get to live in it during that period. Campus West, you know, we're partially renovating it, making it feasible to move groups of faculty into a surge space, which enables us to renovate their building very quickly compared to working around them, so to speak. One that you should be aware of, it's not a highly visible project, so some may not think it's so exciting or sexy, but the utilities underground in that Rockwell quad there, some have been there since the turn of the century, and they're not as friendly as they used to be, and we really need to dig that up and replace those. Anyway. Future projects for which the funding is secured and the design is underway includes Houston Gym. By having Campus West building, we can move everybody out of Houston Gym, do that renovation, and the Houston Gym will be a $28 million project, and those are the timelines. That's the downstairs will be all opened up. Upstairs, we'll move our very heavily used space for the fitness center upstairs instead of being down in the basement where it is now. Again, if you walk through there often, it's always being used, heavily used. The Science and Mathematics building is, phase 2 is, again, a gorgeous facility. If you look in here, you'll see a big globe, which is very interesting. And that is the interior of that. That is the new planetarium. And that should seat about 50 inside it to give you some sense of the size. And you can't imagine what this is going to do for our science students, and I imagine it will be quite gorgeous. Upton Hall, this is an early drawing. It's not a final in any way, but it's trying to suggest that some of these ways to try to have it take on kind of an artsy look. It's the arts. It's going to be the arts and facility. Caudell Hall is in a design phase at present time. The power plant is 65 years old. You can imagine what its efficiency is. We're going to do a study about whether it should be centralized power plant or decentralized. Even if it is centralized, it'll probably be half the size. Now, if you're in the Midwest and you could burn corn cobs, we'd want to keep it centralized. But there may be some advantage of decentralizing. Northwest Missouri does burn corn cobs. They do. And if you can get switchgrass or those kind of things and pelletize it, you can. That was a plan in Missouri. I was going to mow my airport and burn it into the, burn it in. But we were decentralized, and I couldn't imagine trucks going all over campus, these individual buildings, and dumping pellets into the basement of. So we've got to do a study to find out what's best. We're talking about a second student apartment building, called it Stack 2. There's a demand study of 450 beds maybe would be needed. There's the cost. We know there's an issue of parking. We think that we'll be taking that into account. We'll try not to lose spaces this time. Putting these slides together about all the buildings leads me to say we need to do more about sustainability. We are terrific, and we have planned to do LEEDS buildings, and we have doing LEEDS buildings, but I think there's just more we can do, and particularly if we get the students involved in all sorts of things, and I think that's critical. We need to, sitting down in 2 minutes, I wrote down, we should drive down our carbon footprint. We should engage or educate students about responsibilities. We should serve a community as a role model in an urban area. We should reduce energy costs and shift those costs over to our core mission. And if you want to join in, send me an email. And we'll take all the help we can get, and we'll see what we can do to reduce this carbon footprint. I have to say that my last institution, we reduced university utilities by 32%. In fact, and the 32% is going to pay the cost of reducing the utilities, and then eventually, when that bond is paid off, it will become net profit back to the institution. So there's work that can be done. Last year, just to wrap up, last year, at this time I said, we'll make it the year of the arts, because we were doing all this budget stuff, and it was tough. And, you know, We declared it the Year of the Arts, and Dean Christie, who I saw back there, Dean Christie, he took this on, and as I've told him a dozen times, the greatest thing about being a president is you can have a great idea and somebody else does the work. And Dean Christie and a committee, I don't know how many people in here on that committee, it was a huge committee, have done a wonderful job and really brought into focus the arts at Buffalo State, and it's been a wonderful thing. And I want to thank the dean. We should all thank the dean for that. Take a bow. Well, Buffalo State's also unique. You know, we're unique in SUNY. We are the only urban institution. No, that's not true. The urban four-year institution. And a group of faculty and staff sent me a note and said, we'd like this coming year to be the year of the city. And I said, if that's a good idea, let's do it. It's just interesting to me that people were excited enough by the Year of the Arts to say, let's do another something like that. And so that's great, and we're going to do that. And Dean Severinson has agreed to get us started and head that up. And there's already a group of people who wrote this note to me, and Dennis Pronton brought it over and said, great, let's do it. We already do so much, and there's no better way to make that public so that we're not the best kept secret than having something that highlights that. So it's the Year of the City, folks, unless you really object, but it doesn't sound like you do. Let me just end. Like I said, if you haven't gone to graduation, go. The students write these things on their hats. You know, I love you, Mom and Dad. Or my favorite, I love you, Dad. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Isn't that great? Let me just end by saying that kind of my dream, and I may have said this before, but I can't help but say it again. Way back when I was a provost, I said to myself, I'm tired of saying, when somebody said to me, who are you? What do you do? And saying, well, you know, I'm not the University of Iowa and I'm not Iowa State, so I'm what's, you know. I said, who are we really? And I said, you know, what is our niche? And it's what I believe. It's my dream. And that is that we want to be a nationally recognized comprehensive university. And when I say university, this is a university. By any standard other than SUNY has this quirk of calling its comprehensive colleges. Nobody else does. But a nationally recognized comprehensive university delivers a world-class education by offering small college learning environments coupled with large university opportunities. That's our niche. That's what we really do. That's my dream. And so I hope all of you will help me achieve my dream. And I think the next slide says, thank you.